Okay, if everybody could take their seats, welcome. I'm Eric Collins. Good afternoon. I am standing. I hope you can see me over the microphone here. Good afternoon. Thanks, Davis. I'm Eric Collins with Montgomery County's Development Services, Community Economic Development. One of the topics that we have as economic developers that resonates with all of us is how companies actually decide on where to expand and really where to locate their operations. So it's really a constant dance for all of us. In fact, every day that we're working with companies or with prospects, providing the right data to companies and then looking or finding those differentiators that help really keep all of our sites and our communities stand out when we're competing. So really to give us some insight, and I think it's going to be helpful. I'm glad you're just down the road too, by the way, Trevor. Insight on information of what companies and site selectors are looking for. I'm excited to introduce our speaker today to the summit, and that's Trevor Hamilton. He's a partner with Pegasus Partners, which assists international companies to expand in Europe and North America. They provide a comprehensive set of market entry services, market research, business development, sales, site selection, and startup assistance. And they're also partners with a lot of U.S. companies and communities to develop long-term foreign direct investment growth strategies. So Travis has over 20 years more than 20 years of experience, young guy though, in economic development. And a lot of his strategies have led to over 500 location expansion projects resulting in over 600,000. Did I read? Oh, 60,000. 60,000 is still a lot. 60,000 jobs, new jobs, and nearly $10 billion in capital investment. So his skill includes expertise in strategic planning, and how communities prepare for those opportunities when site selectors and companies come into to a new location or looking at a new location. He also understands where this audience, all of you, come from with his experience in leading public and private economic development organizations in Ohio, Tennessee, North Carolina, South Carolina, Commonwealth of Virginia, with experience in working with businesses and communities like us on international locations. He's a graduate of Virginia Tech. He's earned his CECD designation and holds certificates from numerous education courses in economic development, leadership, organizational management, and foreign trade zones. So with that, I'd like to welcome our closing speaker, Trevor Hamilton. Thank you.
Well, thanks, Eric. It is indeed a pleasure to be here today, and it's always refreshing and nice to be able to sometimes stay in your own backyard and do these things and get to know the people that are closer to home to where you are. So I'm actually based out of Cincinnati. I'll talk a little bit about our firm today and where we're located and the types of projects we typically get engaged in. And we'll talk a little bit about then the trends or maybe best practices we're seeing happening in communities with regards to site selection. And then, of course, leave time at the end for questions and answers period. The fewer the questions, the sooner you get to the reception. So, but I'll be around afterwards as well. If you want to approach me afterwards with any questions, I'll be happy to hang around and speak to you after. So what Eric failed to mention, and sometimes I'm reluctant in mentioning this, if only because it tells my age of 20 blah, blah, blah years in the practice. For those of you that have been around in Ohio and been around in economic development in this state long enough, you may recall the Jobs Bill initiative under Governor Voinovich in the early 90s. So I was a former ODOD employee and held the dubious distinction of being the second executive director of the Ohio Tax Credit Authority. And so I've got an affinity for Ohio in my heart. It's really where I kind of cut my teeth early in my career as an economic development professional. And I'm happy to be back here in Ohio, being in Cincinnati now for the last 8 years. So with that, let's talk a little bit about our firm and a little bit about the types of clients that we work with in particular. And that might help you to kind of determine then the kind of things that our clients are looking for in a community and in a location. So our firm is made up of 4 partners. Our managing partner and founder of our group is Benedict Ebing. And you see the 4 of us there, Ika Jordan, John Butler, and myself make up the 4 partners in Pegasus Partners. John and I happen to be, of the 4, we are the 2 that carry the economic development experience. So both of us are former economic developers, John having done both state and local economic development in the past before turning consultant like myself. So I think we bring that little bit of a unique perspective to our site selection projects in that we can work with our client companies to help them understand the community's perspective and understand where the community's coming from when we're sitting at the table together, and to understand the nature of the questions the community may be asking, and that they're not necessarily offensive questions, but that there's a reason why the community is asking certain questions that you want to know about the project and that are key to making the partnership a success. So we are based out of Atlanta. John is actually working out of Nashville and myself out of Cincinnati. So we have a presence that allows us to get to the entire eastern half of the U.S. Pretty efficiently. And most of our clients, as we'll talk about in a moment, tend to look on the eastern half of the U.S. So it's where we stay based. It's where we do most of our business. And nearly all of our site selection projects we do are based on the eastern half of the U.S. And that may become a little bit more evident as we talk about who our clients are in a moment. So we provide more than just site selection services to our clients. We position ourselves as a market entry strategy company. We were founded to do both investments going to Europe and investments coming from Europe. But quite honestly, over the last 5, 6, 7 year period, we've been much more successful, and there's been much more interest in European investment coming this way than so going the other way. So today, nearly 100% of our work we do, it's with inward investment projects coming from Europe to the U.S. But this is the range of services that we provide. Typically, we're going to come in earlier than maybe your typical site selection consultant would. And we are helping that company figure out and assess the U.S. market for their product or service long before they should be thinking about where to locate. They should be answering the question, if to locate, and then if to locate, what that location looks like. And so we'll sit down with our clients and develop a strategy for an approach in the U.S. market. And if the market is right and we feel like it's worth pursuing and there's opportunity there, then we help them with that business plan of what the strategy looks like from a location standpoint and help them to time that strategy out. It could be that we jump right away into a full-blown manufacturing facility. Or it could be that we have a more staged approach where we're advising that company to start with just maybe 3 salespersons and an engineer at a small office somewhere in the U.S. to get started and incrementally grow that presence as they grow their market. So it really kind of ranges anywhere in between, but helping them be better educated about the decision so that when it comes time for a location decision, they're in it for the longer term. Because we want that decision to be a long-term decision for that company. We don't want them to fail. So it's kind of like creating a marketing plan for a small business startup, right? You're helping them develop a plan that gives them every possible avenue of succeeding when they make this decision. So that's kind of everything in the planning stage. In the middle column there, in the market entry piece, that's typically where you'll find us getting involved in the site selection due diligence and helping that company assess locations, make decisions about where to locate, when to locate. And then the third piece of what we offer is going beyond the site selection piece. And for some of our clients, we'll help them get that facility stood up and operational. We'll help them get the U.S. entity established. We might help them set up their U.S. bank account. We may help them set up a payroll company to get the first employee hired here. We may help them get through that first phase till they're ready for start of operation and fully take it over. So we tend to be pretty hands-on with our clients, and we can do any piece of this or all of this. So it kind of depends on what the client's needs are, and we remain flexible in helping them in that way. So this is just a sampling of some of our past clients and the companies we've helped with U.S. market entry strategies or locations. Some may be familiar to you. I would imagine probably very few of these are familiar to you because we tend to look below the radar for opportunities for small to mid-sized companies, and that's kind of our niche. And I'll talk a little bit about that more in a moment. And as we've developed our practice into helping European companies with foreign direct investment projects in the U.S., we found that most of our business opportunities were coming out of Germany. So right now, all of our clients are German clients. So it's just kind of, we gravitated to where our market was, and our market was helping German companies. So that's kind of our niche, and that's our market space that we provide our site selection services in. So most all of these, I believe all of these are German. I think there's one Austrian company up there. But we continue to find good opportunity there in Germany, and I would encourage you to not overlook Germany in your own prospecting for foreign direct investment as well. So in addition to the site selection services, I've just got one slide on our economic development consulting services. So we also assist communities in setting up foreign direct investment strategies. We have a little different approach to that. We're not a lead generation firm. We're not a call firm. You're not going to call us if you're traveling to Germany and you want us to set up 10 appointments while you're there. There are firms to do that, and that has its place, but ours is more looking at developing a much more longer-term approach and a more holistic strategy for a community's foreign direct investment opportunities and how you seek that out, which is more about developing relationships, building bridges into foreign markets, in our case, into Germany. And we base that really on a cluster approach. It's looking at the clusters of economic activity in your region versus regions in Germany, and how we can pair region to region and begin to look at long-term business exchange and flow between two regions in each country, and then ultimately help you to be better positioned to attract foreign direct investment into to your community. So back to the site selection side of what we do. I wanted to give you a profile of our target customers so you understand the kind of companies that we're working with if we come to your community with a prospect. So I mentioned before, our target market is small to mid-sized German companies. They're called the German Mittelstand, okay? So it would be what we would consider small business here in the United States. They're typically 500 or less employees. They tend to have very niche products and niche markets that they're participating in. Most of these companies are very owner involved, and I would say over half of our clients are still family-owned companies in Germany. So typically the decision maker is the owner, and it's a family-run business. Although the nature of that's changing a little bit because some of now what we're finding in Germany, some of these family-run companies are starting to be investor-owned. So as each successive generation is maybe losing interest in the business, we see that kind of working two ways. So the next or younger generation in the family that may be running the business can have more global aspirations than did maybe their father who was running the business before, for instance. And that provides good opportunities for us. It provides good opportunities for you as maybe another generation of a family-owned business is thinking more global and taking their business abroad and into foreign markets. But we're also finding, too, that if the interest is lost there with successive generations of the family-owned business, now we're starting to see a little bit of a trending toward investment groups buying up these small, mid-sized companies in Germany. It's still opportunity, but these investor-owned companies now, though, most definitely have higher aspirations. They have higher profit goals. They have higher growth models and targets for the companies. And again, one way to do that is to think outside of their traditional market, which is Europe, and taking their business more abroad. These businesses typically, they want to be in it for the long haul, so to speak. They're long-term in nature in how they plan their investments and where they want to be. They tend to be responsible for their employees' job security. They take care of their employees really well. They tend to be family-oriented businesses. Work is work, and when you're at work, you're expected to do a good job. But they tend to have family-friendly hiring, human resource policies, things that encourage family away from work. These companies tend to be engaged with their communities. As I said, a lot of them are family-run. They like to be engaged and involved in the community they're invested in and feel a part of the community they're in. And many of them are actively engaged and involved in doing training for their workers as well. And we'll talk a little bit about the German apprenticeship programs in a moment. So, from my perspective, they're a good client, but I also think that, these are good candidate companies for your communities as well. These are companies you would want in your community from my perspective. They're small to mid-size, and a lot of them may start with 25, 50, 75 jobs. But once they're established and once they're there, they like making community ties, they like being in it for the long term, and great opportunities to grow that company beyond just the initial location. So just a little bit about the German Mittelstand companies in Germany and the economic impact they're having in their country. These statistics maybe aren't unlike the statistics we see in our own country of the impact of small business in America, right? So in Germany, there's over 3.6 million companies, or 99% of all German companies fall within this category, the German Mittelstand, less than 500 employees. They generate over half of the German GDP each year. They support over 15 million jobs in Germany, which is 60% of all the jobs in Germany are within these small to mid-sized companies. They train 84% of all apprentice in Germany. Half of them are active in international markets, either exporting or FDI. So to me, that also speaks opportunity. There's only half that are participating internationally. So there's still room, I think, for capturing more growth out of Germany. And in Germany, they're really considered the economic engine of the country. So where do we find these companies? Much like here in the US, you find clusters of where certain types of businesses are located. And not unlike here, you see that in Germany as well, where certain sectors are clustered around either each other or economic centers in the country. And this is where we look for opportunity. It's where you as communities could be looking for opportunity. And if your interest is in aerospace and aviation, and your interest is in attracting foreign direct investment from small to mid-sized firms in Germany, then use resources like this to help you identify where you should be building relationships within country where clusters of this activity exist and where there's potential partnership with like industries there with maybe your country, companies here and in your region. So, you can see it's kind of dispersed all over the country, although you can kind of see why a lot of folks focus on southern Germany, because there's a lot of clustering of economic activity in southern Germany. That's also where you'll find the big green dots, which is manufacturing. So, a lot of communities are chasing after the manufacturing opportunities, and a lot of that's concentrated in the southern half of Germany. But, there's other areas of the country as well where there's maybe often underlooked opportunities for other clusters of opportunity as well. So, just another slide on clustering and just another resource for you to know that's out there. This is a state-by-state breakdown in Germany of all their organized and recognized clusters within Germany. Interestingly, as a country and at the federal level in Germany, there's a federal initiative around clustering and supporting clusters of economic activity. And so there are federal support programs that encourage clustering within their country, of help encouraging, growing, and expanding each of these types of clusters in the country. The top one with all the red marks, that's Bavaria, that's Munich, that's southern Germany. You can see again kind of where a lot of the economic activity is clustered in Germany. It's in the southern half. But again, resources like that, help us to kind of figure out, okay, where are, the clusters of opportunity existing within Germany, maybe for foreign direct investment opportunities here. So let's talk a little bit about foreign direct investment and what we've been experiencing over the last few years and then even most recently. So kind of setting Germany aside and just looking at overall foreign direct investment into the United States, we've been on a pretty good track record. And in fact, in 2015 and 2016, we here in the United States realized record years for foreign direct investment coming inward into the United States. Now you see we had a little bit of a problem in 2017 as we've experienced quite a dip in foreign direct investment coming into the U.S. in 2017. Now, two things are happening there. That's a global phenomenon as well. So on the one hand, overall foreign direct investment into countries from other countries declined in 2017. In the United States, it happened to decline faster and at a bigger rate than it did globally. And so there's all kinds of theories tied to why this is happening. It seems the most predominant theories, if you will, and what we're hearing from our clients in Europe, it's that with the current administration, there's a lot of uncertainty around all things international, around trade, immigration issues. One of President Trump's first executive orders was to pull out a Trans-Pacific Partnership. In and of itself, whether it was good or bad or whether it was something we should do or not, it sends signals of uncertainty about trade and free trade around the world and to companies that we talk to about investing in the United States here. Immigration is also an issue that it's causing questions, okay, in the minds of our clients that we work with that just don't understand the debate about immigration. They're concerned, even if it's from Germany, how are immigration policies going to affect their ability to set up plants in the U.S.? How is it going to affect their abilities to send expatriates back and forth on visas to help get the facility up and running and managed? And so it caused some uncertainty in the marketplace. However, that all being said, I think as we look to 2018 and beyond, we're finding that there's going to be a pent-up demand of foreign direct investment that we believe is going to be coming back. One of the early positive signals that we're getting from that is that there's positive reaction now to the president's tax cut and jobs plan. So what that is doing is to lower the overall corporate tax rate in the United States. And whereas before, foreign companies were more inclined to keep their presence more manageable or downsized in the U.S. from a tax liability standpoint, it's kind of opened that up now to make it more cost effective and less costly for foreign companies to invest in the U.S. And it's almost providing a reverse incentive now, and it's incentivizing companies to localize production here in the U.S., okay, that's part of the jobs piece of it, right? It's encouraging localized job creation here in the U.S. market. And so we think that that's going to be a positive indicator of a return in foreign direct investment into the U.S. because it's setting up a more favorable, from a cost standpoint, a more favorable taxing situation for foreign companies investing here that are choosing to create jobs here and localize production here in the United States. So we're hopeful and expecting that that's going to change for our clients as well in Germany. Here is this is the period 2011 to 2016, the top sources of inward foreign direct investment into the United States by country. For us, Germany has traditionally been in the top 5. You see who the top 5 countries are over the last 5 years that have been investing into the U.S. This is one of the reasons we have been successful with Germany, because year after year, they're generally in the top 5 in terms of leading companies that are choosing to invest here in the United States. And I think you as communities should take interest in this kind of data and information, because it's not only telling you historically what are the top countries that are choosing to invest here in the United States, but don't overlook countries that are a little further down the list, that over that period of time, they might not be a top foreign direct investor here in the United States, but look at Brazil, for instance, that over this period of time has grown 195% in foreign direct investment in the United States. Israel, 162%. China, of course, we know about 534%. Singapore. So you kind of weigh that balance of who are your traditional top investors in the foreign direct investment market here in the U.S., and who are maybe some of the up-and-coming and faster-growing companies, I should say countries. And for us, we're expecting when that uptick comes in later here in 2018, 2019, that these are the kind of companies we're going to see more activity of coming out of Germany in particular. We think it's going to be the small to mid-sized companies, again, that will be the champions for foreign direct investment coming this way. And we think it's going to be additional automotive, aerospace, engineering, machine building, some of your more traditional or typical manufacturing type opportunities. So we think this is going to also, it's going to be more opportunities for you as communities as we move forward into the next maybe 3 to 5 year period. And there's another good resource I'll mention that we kind of follow just to follow the foreign direct investment trends. I mean, you can look at Select USA has some pretty good information about foreign direct investment into the United States, which is an initiative of the U.S. Department of Commerce. We tend to follow something called Foreign Direct Investment Intelligence magazine. They also have a pretty good website, and they post regular articles about foreign direct investment trends globally, not just U.S., but globally what's happening in foreign direct investment projects. And they too have forecasted that with the tax plan, that's going to have a positive ramifications in driving foreign direct investment again. And they have named the United States as the top manufacturing foreign direct investment location globally for 2018 and 2019. So I think all is well for manufacturing, for foreign direct investment over the next couple of years. So let me walk through some of what I'll call site selection trends, or some of the things we're seeing in terms of what our clients are looking for, maybe some best practices we're seeing in communities. The first one I talk about, hopefully, and shouldn't be a major surprise to you, and it's been mentioned probably every session I've sat in today, and that's workforce. So that's gravitated, as we all know, to the top of the list in location decisions, because companies want to know that they have a stable and available workforce. We've shifted away from the old model of quantity at low cost to now it's quality as equally important as quantity. Cost is still a factor, but the emphasis on quality first, quantity and cost seems to have shifted. Our clients are looking for quality employees, trainable employees to work in their operations. From our standpoint, because we work mainly with industrial clients, we're looking for your manufacturing environment kind of opportunities, skilled trade sets, robotics, programmers, CNC machine operators, welders. And some communities are just having a hard time coming up with an available pool of those kind of workers. What I would encourage you to do, and what we've seen other communities do, and I know you're doing it here, but it's grow your talent and grow your own. STEM programs are terribly important to our clients and to the manufacturing base of this country. And I would just encourage you to continue to pursue building out your STEM programs. That's what I would call growing your talent. And we've also seen communities that have been successful in what I would call attracting talent. And that's about quality of life, right? And livability of a community. Doing things that are going to attract quality of talent to your area and an employment base where folks are going to want to live. Folks are going to move to a location, find their job later. It's got good livability. And I think if you're working hand in hand with growing and attracting talent, I think that's a strong strategy for helping meet the needs of your existing employers first and foremost, and new ones as well. For our clients that tend to be small to mid-sized, they don't have a lot of resources on their own. They like a lot of personal attention. They like hand-holding, if you will. They like communities that are willing to get in and involved and engage with them and help them out with seemingly maybe the simplest of things. But one of the things that I've seen some communities do a really great job of on the workforce side is helping that company through that whole process. Not just showing us information about the available pool of workers, but after the decision, how are you going to work with this company hand in hand through that process of locating the talent, training the talent, onboarding the talent? What can you do through that ramp-up stage to make it easier on that company to find the kind of employees that they need? The other thing that, it seems rather simple, but a lot of communities don't have it, but it's good information for our clients. It's a good solid wage and benefit survey. I've seen these done through chambers. I've seen them done through economic development organizations. I've seen manufacturing associations will do them. That's a lot of good information for us to have, particularly on the manufacturing sector. If you can produce relevant and current information about the state of wages and benefits within your existing community. One of the things, too, that our clients are starting to focus a bit more on, which is hard to get a handle on in communities, but it's turnover rates. Typically, you'll find turnover rates within a good wage and benefit survey, so we kind of can understand what the churn is like in a community and are employees staying with a job for a period of time, and is there a stable employment base, or is there a high turnover, and what's causing that? So. Also, in the way of workforce, one really interesting program that we're following quite closely and we're getting engaged with the German American Chamber is the German apprenticeship program. So the federal government in Germany several years ago launched an initiative to globalize their German dual education system, which is basically their German apprenticeship program. And as their companies have gone global and have located in countries around the world, the federal government has put systems in place and institutions in place to be able to take the model of the German apprenticeship program into the very markets where their companies have been investing and growing and trying to add workers, in the absence of having good, solid German recognizable apprenticeship programs in those countries. So in the United States, Germany has recognized the German American Chamber of Commerce as the entity responsible for creating an apprenticeship program based on the German dual education system here in the United States that would allow a community and consortium of companies to certify workers with an apprentice under both your own apprentice program and one that's also recognized under the German model as well. For our German companies, this is an incredible competitive asset. If we can go into a community or region that has an understanding for this and is training potential employees under an apprenticeship program that they understand and they get, that's a huge competitive advantage. But not just for German companies either. It's, we believe, a best practice model that we could follow here in the U.S. in developing these apprenticeship programs. The timing is right for this as well here in the U.S. Because just last month, President Trump signed an executive order to create a task force on the expansion of apprenticeships in the United States. It's a multi-department task force that's sitting under the U.S. Department of Labor that's charged with creating a strategy and recommendations on how we in the United States can expand apprenticeship programs, expand them into other skill sets and other trades. We think this is good timing and matches up well with what the German model is trying to do here in the United States. There's a reference website for you to check out. Here in Ohio, you're part of the German-American Chamber of Commerce, Chicago. So out of the Chicago German-American Chamber of Commerce region, they've created this consortium called the Industry Consortium for Advanced Technical Training. They've created a website. If you want to know more about that program, you can check it out there. You can also feel free to contact us. We're working in partnership with the German-American Chamber to help ready community and companies for how they can get certified under this particular program. So if you're interested, I'll be happy to talk more with you later about that. Okay, workforce aside, other things we're seeing. So technology is certainly changing the way which we do business. And one of the things that I think a lot of site selectors would tell you is that particularly early in the process, we're doing a lot of desktop analysis, and we're doing things that we used to had to do on the ground before in the community, or that we had to reach out and call a community to get that kind of information. There's so many more resources available to us, and we are under such more time constraints to gather information, process information, that much of the early phase work we do literally sitting at a desktop and gathering information very early stage, preliminary information we're using to in some cases make cuts just based on regional information and data we're collecting. So my message to you is just make sure you're keeping your data sets up to date. Make sure you're keeping your data out there. I know you want to talk to us. I know I have some communities that would rather not put their information out there. They'd rather make me call them, but yeah, that doesn't do any of us a service in the end. And so the more information you can have out there, just a good solid website with information. For me, it doesn't have to have all the bells and whistles, but solid information about your community, that's still very valuable to us. When we do get engaged, we're getting engaged in different ways now with WebEx and Skype, and it allows us to be able to interface and do community visits virtually. And with the things I've seen communities doing with virtual site tours and virtual building tours, and we can literally sit in a conference room and tee up 3 communities in one afternoon through a WebEx call and do a first community visit virtually. It doesn't always work, and it's, believe me, not a substitute, in my opinion, for that on-the-ground relationship building. We would never make a final decision based strictly on virtual tours and virtual meetings. But it does help in that initial process of gathering information and helping us to decide which of the finalist communities that we're going to make the actual visit to. I just can't overemphasize the importance of having a good, solid, diverse economic development team. When we come into your community, we want to talk to more than just the economic development rep for your community or the chamber person, or we want to see others engaged in the process. So from my perspective, don't surprise us with people at the table, but have that team of, who's your go-to for a prospect project. Have your workforce development service providers at the table, your education institutions at the table, your utilities at the table. That's okay. We'd rather get all the information we can out of a first visit as possible and have good, solid information when we leave there. So make sure your team understands the speed of information. It's being more and more compressed in terms of how quickly these decisions are being made. So the more your team understands that when you call them and you need utility information tomorrow morning, just make sure your team understands the importance of promptness, responsiveness, and the quicker you can gather the information and get back to us, the better it positions you with our clients. The other one too that I'd like to mention is that make sure your team is prepared when they come to the table and to meet with us and a prospect. And I know you all are doing this. I'm hopeful you all are doing this. But we've walked into awkward situations before where it's evident that the team is not rehearsed or practiced. Maybe and seemingly it might be the first time that somebody has sat across the table with a prospect and not accustomed to the kind of questions that a prospect asks. We've walked into certain situations where you can tell it's evident when the community team is sitting there, and I had this happen once where we're starting a meeting and they're walking in the room and they're introducing themselves to each other, and you can tell, okay, that's the first time they're meeting each other, and it's like, oh, okay, or it's like the more cohesive and a team can be at the table, it gives our client a better feeling that if we decide to locate there, oh wow, this team's got it together. They know each other, they work together, they talk to each other every day. They're going to get my project up and running. I have a confidence that I locate in this community. They're going to take care of me. And another just kind of this best practice for us, but we don't mind having contact information cards. It's really helpful for us when we leave there that day. If you can go ahead and prepare that key contact list for us. Who's a single point of contact for that community, but then who's the go-to at the electric company, who's the go-to at the wastewater treatment plant, who's the go-to at the railroad, so that we understand who your team is and who to contact in the event that we need more information. But I can tell you from our perspective, though, we respect the single point of contact on your side as well, and we never like to leave anybody on your team out of the loop. And so we like to work with you on that so that we're not contacting separately each of these different entities and nobody knows what's going on. We prefer that to be a kind of open and transparent process. Site readiness, that was already mentioned this morning as well, and I heard it in the Jobs Ohio presentation. The certified sites, they're good, they're great, believe me, but they're not the only sites we'll look at. But I think the message here is that whether it's certified or not, that you've done the due diligence that typically is required of certification to make sure you're ready, so that when we're coming to do a site visit, you've done all the due diligence possible on that piece of property. You have all the answers. You generally know what those questions are that we're going to be asked and have those readily available to us. Just a few things I would mention on site visits or site readiness. One of the things that's important to us is acknowledge any impediments on the site to us. We'd rather know now than later. And if you know there's an impediment on the site, that's okay. Tell us about it, okay? But what we'd like to hear is that there's a site impediment, something's wrong, but you have a plan on how you're going to fix it. And if there's something that's going to get in the way of a plant layout, no matter how we sit it on that site, let us know that you've thought about it and what the plan is and how you would remedy it in the event we should choose to locate there. Timeline is very important as well. A community that can hand us a piece of paper and show that they've thought about the development timeline on a site that's a wow factor for us, because if you can show that you've thought about the time it takes to get from decision to construction, that's huge for us. Map out the timeline for utilities, roads, all the infrastructure necessary, site grading prep, whatever you can think of, so that we know that this site is ready to break ground either in 60 days or 6 months. And maybe it doesn't matter to us, but just so that so that we know definitively what we're talking about in terms of the timeline for getting the site going. Have your ground tour laid out ahead of time. Again, oftentimes we wind up not often, sometimes, okay? This is probably a rarer than most often. We end up at a site and the tour hadn't been prepared enough ahead of time and we can't get a good impression of the site. Help us to be able to see the site and consider cutting access road. If there's no access road there now, that's fine. We're willing to look at pieces of dirt without roads, that's fine. But get us access to it. If we have to look across here or there and try to determine what is the site and visualize it, the easier you can make it for us to get onto the site and see it and visualize it, the better. Aerial videos are, I mean, they're good. I mean, they're becoming more popular now. I mean, that's kind of a good way to get a visual from the air if you have ability to take an aerial video of a site. Some of the things too, both from the ground and for aerial tours that are really pretty cool for us. It's anything you can do to identify the boundaries of the property from a ground tour or from the air. From the air, it's particularly important. I've seen communities go out and flag it with just streamers in trees, X's on the ground, somehow to delineate the bounds so that when you're flying over the site, you get an impression, okay, there's the 100-acre site. I can clearly see, visualize it. And there's one mega site that I know of that, with a mega site, it's huge. At one point, from its longest part, it was, what was it? I think it was approaching like 1,800 feet or something like that. And it was a long site. So they put up telephone poles with flashing beacons at the boundaries, so that when we were when you do a ground tour, you can see from the ground, from the air. Great visualization helps us to get a better feel for the site. Quickly moving through a few other things. Environmental sustainability is becoming a hot topic. I know for some of our companies, and maybe it's just because they're more accustomed to that in Europe, but it's not a deciding factor, but it's one of those things that sometimes can kind of push you ahead of the pack. If you understand that companies are now becoming much more aware of their environmental sustainability, they're becoming more globally responsible, and anything you can speak to in your community that you're doing the same, that resonates well with our clients, whether it's sustainable forms of power generation or whether it's any kind of green initiatives, reduce and recycle initiatives, anything that speaks to what your community is doing and how this community or company could be a partner in global sustainability. We're seeing a little bit of trending toward LEED certification as well. Certain prospects, whether it's the energy savings or quite frankly just that they feel it's responsible to do to have a LEED qualified facility or certified facility, we're seeing that happen. And I'm starting to see it with some manufacturing facilities, which is pretty rare. Mostly you see that in office buildings and such. But supply chain solutions, sometimes that comes into play with our clients. When they look at a location, they want to know that where their supply inputs are going to come from. And if you can help us to ascertain where some of their suppliers might be. We had this come into play with an automotive client of ours that was sourcing stamped metal parts. They were doing some light fabrication and mainly assembly work, but they needed to sub out to companies that could provide stamped metal parts for automotive. And so we had to, as part of the site location due diligence, we had to canvass potential suppliers and find out what metal stamping companies in the region were capable of producing stamped metal parts to automotive specifications. So sometimes we might come to you looking to help your existing business and industry by looking at supply chain companies to help the prospects we're helping. I already talked a little bit about livability and workforce. It's not a top factor for our companies, but it can be a deciding factor. I had one client, we chose to stay in the downtown of an area we were in, and I'm not going to mention which downtown, and it's nowhere near here. But it was so depressing, so economically depressed, you didn't feel safe, and that client walked away feeling like, well, I'm not going to locate in the downtown, but a vibrant community and a downtown that shows some vibrancy, it makes them feel better about the area. And it put a really negative impression in this client's mind. So everything you're doing in your downtowns and you're doing here in downtown Dayton, that's absolutely on the right track in terms of creating better quality of life, downtown livability, workability, playability, is that a word? Live, work, play environments in the downtowns. That really bodes well, not just for talent attraction and talent retention, but it speaks volumes to the kind of companies that are locating in your community as well, I think. Just a word about incentives. Okay, for our clients, incentives are not terribly important. I'll be just honest with you. We're not looking for the community that can provide the best incentive, and nor is that something we consider early on in the process. It will come in later into play, but most of our clients, as I said before, they're looking for meaningful ways you can get engaged and help them. So sometimes it's not a financial incentive necessarily. You can be creative with at least our clients and how you can help them. It may be in-kind things you can do for them. It may be, we had one client that in part made the location decision on a community that really just developed a relationship with the company. They just seemed to hit it off really well every time they came to visit. And ultimately, this community approached their university about a technology incubator that they had, and they worked out an incentive to create a landing pad for this company that basically gave them, I think it may have been either, maybe it was 3 or 6 months of free rent in the incubator to set up an office just as a landing pad to get started. Well, that was terribly important to a small company that's getting started with no place to put their production right away, but it gave them an office, a presence, allowed them to get established, be here on site to build up the project. And ultimately, they started paying rent after the inducement period was over. So don't afraid to get creative with us on incentives. Just be clear about the incentives with us and what you can do, but we're not going to aggressively negotiate with you on those. We'd rather make the location decision based on things much more important in our mind than incentives. Just a little bit of word about confidentiality. Again, I trust everybody understands and knows confidentiality. We rarely run into it anymore, but sometimes our clients want to go into the cloak of confidentiality. A lot of our clients don't really care, and if they don't, we'll let you know that, and we'll be transparent. Even on the first site visit, we've walked into communities and they don't care. They're not particularly sensitive to the competition finding out what they're doing. Again, a lot of our clients run under the radar, but if it's sensitive to the company's competitive position, they don't want their competitors to find out they're looking in the United States or looking at a certain market to locate to, then yeah, we'll ask you to keep it confidential. We may or may not tell you who it is up front. If we do, sometimes we'll, like most others, we'll ask you for a non-disclosure agreement. But it also, and I think it works the other way too, it protects the community's competitive position as well, because it doesn't behoove you to leak information publicly about a project, not necessarily for, or not only for the risk of losing the project altogether with the client company, but I've seen some communities that they might not say the company name, but they leak the project name out in the press, and they might not say the company name, but Project Bluebell was in our community today, and we're going to do this for them. Well, okay. If I'm any good economic developer, I'm looking who my competition is, and I'm searching the internet, and I'm looking for who I'm competing with if the client's not telling me. And if I find Project Bluebell pop up and XYZ community out here is talking about it, it's like, oh, okay, well, I know they're looking here. And so, again, that's really not, we don't run into that very often anymore. I think most economic development folks understand that. And you're doing a good job at educating your team players about maintaining that confidentiality. So, and just to kind of keep it light, maybe. So project code names, right? There's no particular science about project code names. Sometimes I think we as site selectors and as companies overthink it, and we try to get a bit too creative. Sometimes that can bite us if we, code name something that's too terribly close to what the project really is. You can find out sometimes, but so I just started kind of keeping a log of, project names. Now, every one of them I'm going to show you I trust are old enough where this isn't sensitive information anymore. But I just thought it was kind of interesting, the different project names. So, if maybe you're into sports, there's a theme going here. All these are live. These were real deals at one time, okay? Maybe nature, outdoors. Colors, okay, pretty simple enough. There's a lot of color-coded projects out there. these are just, some of my favorite. Where some of these ever came from, I don't know. But these are real deals at one time. So NyQuil, I don't know. So polar bear, actually, that one is public, and that's probably the biggest project on here. But that was Volkswagen's project in Tennessee. So it was codenamed Polar Bear, and as it goes, that was just the high school mascot of one of the consultants that was working on the project. So that had absolutely no meaning to the project at all. And then last but not least, what I like to call, okay, these people were just being plain lazy. But really, so. Project urgent, okay, like they all aren't urgent, right? So, okay, so I know I'm running out of time, and I've left very little time for questions. I'm going to leave you with this, so good luck. Squint really hard. This is a real phase 1 site selection that we did, obviously, and I'm double checking. I've stripped everything out of it to who the client was or who the candidate locations were. This one still is under enough of a confidentiality agreement where I can't talk about it in terms of its conclusion or who the company was. But so this was a real phase 1 that we did. On the one hand, it's pretty simple, but on the other hand, there's a lot of work and involvement behind the scenes to do the phase 1 piece. So I'm counting, let's see, we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So 8, what I would call major topics of interest that we were using in the evaluation, and probably 35, 40 subtopics under those. And so what we typically do is to sit down with a client and determine those location factors, both from the client's perspective, what's important to them, and we tried to provide input then on best practices and what other clients have done, and maybe help them recognize things they're not thinking about in the evaluation that we can add into the mix. And then we come to a conclusion on what this phase 1 analysis would be. We create a weighting and scoring schedule for how we're going to weight and score all these factors. And now in this case, we have candidate location A and B on the far right-hand side. So, and in this case, we knew the 2 finalist sites. So, and in this case, you would expect the 2 finalist sites to be pretty good, okay? So, and the color coding was just a very simplistic way of just graphically illustrating kind of behind the scenes what we were doing to evaluate each topic. So green obviously meant in this case that it was a green light. Everything was good to go, it checks out. That site or community met whatever criteria we had established as the minimum. Yellow was areas of concern, things that would require further due diligence. Maybe there was something there that wasn't quite where we felt comfortable, that maybe the community or site was lacking in some way. And then red in this case was literally just a red flag. These were potential no-go issues, things where we found a real problem area that we either had to revisit and come to a solution to, or it could mean it would be for possible elimination. So, and then we just go through each topic and score it, and we determine an advantage, one site over the other, and which site had an advantage overall in workforce. So we looked at availability of the workforce, we looked at the quality of the workforce. This particular company used seasonal employment to augment it with their full-time employment. So we really kind of dug into the seasonal employment availability within each respective community. Your typical things that we do on a first pass, labor participation rates, high school graduation rates, turnover, age of workforce, those kind of things. We looked at competition for labor in each of these markets as well. We looked to announce projects and warrant notifications. So as some indicator of, okay, has there been 2 or 3 companies that have just announced and they're going to be hiring 1,500 employees over the next 2 to 3 years? How's that going to impact, if our company locates there, their ability to compete with other companies that are adding jobs? which is great for a community, but sometimes it can be a concern for us if there's competition for that labor. Conversely, we'll look at layoffs too, and we'll take into consideration layoffs in a community, either of like skill set or transferable skill sets. If there's layoffs in a community of an industry that we believe, and if you can show to us that those skill sets are transferable and retrainable to what our company would be needing, that's okay as well. Cost of labor, we looked at unions. In this case, it wasn't necessarily pro-union or anti-union, it was just assessing the union climate. Not necessarily union good or bad, but what were union relationships like in those areas? What were labor relationships like in those areas? Looking at strikes and management and labor strife and those kind of things, trying to assess just the labor climate. Infrastructure, that's pretty typical stuff. One of the red things on infrastructure was public roads in this case, and what we found out was that one of the sites was limited in terms of its access. It had only one access point to a major highway, which was also being used quite a bit by commuter traffic. And through just newspaper articles and things, we were able to ascertain that there was a traffic problem in front of this site. And they were having to sequence and stage traffic lights for a mile down the road to handle traffic flow. And our concern was that this was the only point of entry in and out of this site. And if we're going to have tractor and trailer trucks coming in and out of this, what was being positioned as a manufacturing site, that was going to have competing use with road traffic already there, and it could prevent a potential problem area. Again, not necessarily an eliminator, but it's something we would bring to the community's attention to say, okay, is this a solvable issue? Is there another access point we can cut in? How do we deal with the traffic situation? Anything else of interest? Maybe a couple unusual things. In this case, we looked at the fiscal health of the state and local governments as some indicator of the stability of the local governments. Are they struggling to meet their budget every year? What's the local and state tax situation? What issues are a topic in the legislature? And this was a manufacturing company, so we looked pretty hard at the existing manufacturing sector there and trends in manufacturing. Was it a manufacturing climate good? Was there support mechanisms in place for manufacturing? Was there state support for the manufacturing sector, local support of the manufacturing sector? So just to kind of give you an idea of some of the things that we might typically look at on a first pass evaluation of a community. So, and with that, I'm into the reception. So, Eric, I don't know how you want to leave for questions or not, but willing to take some now, or as I said, I'll be around after. But
if anybody has a question, feel free to ask Trevor now.
Trevor J.C. Wallace from JCTC days.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so 2 questions real quick. First of all, we have a really good relationship in Troy, Ohio with our German companies. Do your prospects want to meet with the German companies? And secondly, the career centers that serve the northern Dayton area are the leaders in Ohio and pretty much the Midwest in the German apprenticeship model. And we don't, we want to lead with that story, but when you're talking about putting on a spreadsheet, it doesn't translate into, we're 3 years, 4 years into this now. So how do we get there with that?
Yeah, I'll answer your second part of your question first to respond to it. I think that's fantastic. I'm glad you're already making headway down that path. Yes, it's something that's very important for our clients to know about. And so the more you can get that word out about what you're doing, even to folks like us that are working with the German community, absolutely, that's terribly important information for us to know. And in fact, I'm right down the road. I'd be happy to take the time to even come up and see what they're doing and check it out firsthand. To your first question, yes, our clients want to, in general, meet with other businesses in the community. We do that sometimes as part of the workforce assessment, but otherwise just to get a feel for what it's like to do business here. And yes, it's helpful, but not always necessary. But even if you have 1 or 2 German companies you can offer to meet with them, that's great. And if there's still a German that's involved in management here that's available to, they can talk in German all they want to, and, you know, and it's, and we found this with one company. We found that the prospect company was already doing business with the other local company's parent company back in Germany. So there was this relationship already existing in country between those two companies anyway. And so they were able to hit it off really nice and talk about things that were in common to their business and their business relationship. So yes, terribly important, but you don't have to take us to your only German restaurant in town. You know, they can get German food back home. It's nice, but they'd rather experience everything that's about America while they're here. So.
Any other questions?
Good.
Trevor, thank you. Thank you, Trevor. You know, regardless if you're new to economic development or you're an experienced economic developer, you know, Trevor, thanks for making the way up north a little bit. And I think all of us can take away many things from your presentation today. So thank you very much for being here. With that, we're going to go ahead and wrap up today's summit. And we do have refreshments.